Hey guys, so we're going to be doing an update from the latest alpha build. Long story short, people have been listening to our feedback when it comes to legendary items, so good news. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump directly to the post, read it to you, and then we'll have a little conversation about it afterwards. Calgon. So at the start of the expansion, while only one legendary at a time can be equipped, so that while extraordinarily lucky people have more choice about which one to use when, they won't be significantly more powerful than somebody that isn't quite as lucky. As the expansion progresses, the number of legendaries that can be equipped at once will go up, although still limited to a relatively small number of slots. So what does this mean, long story short? Basically, my analogy in my last video about the two mages, one had everything, the other one had nothing. Even if you're super lucky and you get those 10 items right off the bat, you can only use one legendary item at a time. Yes, that's still more powerful because you can swap them out on a fight-by-fight basis. You can have your single target one, your AoE one, your utility one. So you're still at an advantage by having more, but it won't be as extreme if you had all of them equipped at once, and this guy over here is, nothing or only just one mediocre one. So there's still an incentive and advantage to having all of the items, but it isn't as necessary as it would be. Watcher Dev. I feel that the issue is that this type of legendary will even be allowed into the game. I haven't spoken to a single person that doesn't think there'll be a nightmare for raiders. Even one of these items can offer a ridiculous power difference for certain spells/classes. As you note, there is a massive amount of tuning yet to be done here. A legendary that makes you unkillable or that doubles your damage is not a legendary that will be going live in that form. We're testing a lot of different ideas. Some need number adjustments, others may prove impossible to tune or unfun. Alpha is alpha. But if we're in a space where items being powerful and transformative is unacceptable, then that feels like a problem. Marginal passive stat increases, like replacing your braces that have 93 haste with braces that have 105 haste, are certainly easy to balance and safe. They're also pretty dull, and reward should be anything but. Currently, completing set bonuses or getting powerful trinkets are some of the more rewarding moments, and those offer powerful effects comparable to many of the planned Legion legendaries. In a way, things like the Archimon trinkets in patch 6.2 are a preview of how some of these effects might interact and transform gameplay. We wish more items felt like those, and fewer felt like getting that bracer upgrade. Way back in the early days of WoW, getting a hand of Edward the Odd out of a strongbox was like winning the lottery, and every enemy you killed had the potential to be that lucky ticket. Over the years, loot delivery mechanics and their impact have become more and more streamlined, often at the expense of excitement. Legendary items offer a bit of that classic feel. That said, in addition to the overall unique equipped limit, our current thinking is there'll be a suppression aura in effect on mythic raids for the first X weeks after given raid zones open. Disabling legendary item special effects, they will still function normally as high item level regular items. This will serve to limit any perceived unfairness in the progression race, while also serving as a self-nerfing mechanism that can kick in once the race is done. Okay, so let's sort of unpack that and what does that all mean. So the first bit is talking about how, to begin with, will be limited to only one legendary, and then I imagine as new patches and new tiers come out, you can then have 2, maybe even 3. And then the Watcher Dev was a reply to someone's post on the forums, and there's quite a few important things in there which may not initially be obvious. So he says to begin with that, this is still very early tuning, alpha is alpha. This is a trend which somewhat worries me and scares me a little bit, and something that I'm seeing on nearly every single piece of feedback that's been offered towards Legion is, hey guys, here's a problem, and the dev team turns around and says, well, look at that problem, but don't worry, alpha is alpha, we're in early stages. While I commend Blizzard for taking the approach to rethink a lot of their core ideas, I do worry about the timeline of the alpha, and when is beta going to start, if ever, and where is launch on the horizon, and I'll make a separate video about that, but I just kind of wanted to raise that point, because think about how many times they say alpha is alpha. A lot of these ideas seem like they're fairly unpolished, which is quite surprising from Blizzard, so keep an eye on that. So that's the first bit, out of the way. So he then talks about how, You know, just having a marginal stat upgrade on your braces, you know, the increase of getting a 8 haste or something. Yeah, okay, it's easy to balance, but it's not particularly exciting. This is something I like, and I do think that, you know, in general, the game should be more exciting. It should feel more rewarding when you finally get that item. And in that sense, the legendary system is good. However, I do still worry that knowing game development in general, not just upwards, but knowing game development in general, and knowing how many legendary items they're planning on adding, and there's a lot. There's more than 100 at this point, and there will be more and more being churned out between now and beta, and between beta and launch, and between launch to the next patch. You know, there are a lot of items. Having, you know, even a rough balance across the board, especially with these crazy effects, because again, the crazier the effect, the harder it is to balance, because it's not just like, oh, you look at the numbers and you just make sure they're roughly in line. When you have an item which can be equipped by multiple classes, and certain scenarios, certain boss fights, that's where the issues start to arise. And yes, while you will be limited to only having one equipped at a time to start out, the fact that you can change these in between fights is, you know, slightly problematic, because you still need to catch them all. It's that still Pokemon-esque of you need everything. It's not just, oh, don't worry, hardcore raiders, it's not that bad. You don't need to have 12 of them. If you want to be a hardcore raider and you need 12 different ones for each boss, then you still need to go out and collect 12 of them. So that's, you know, just because they're limited doesn't mean that they're no longer an issue. And even at the casual end of the spectrum, you know, you're gonna feel bad when you've got all these really cool items and you can only have one of them equipped. And also, looking at some of the early ones, there were a few Fire Mage specific items which had interesting interactions with Flame Strike, and it looked like they'd clearly been designed to interact with one another. So having these kind of like half sets, it seems odd. Another good example is there are multiple legendaries which give you dramatic increases to movement speed. And in my last legendary preview video, I covered a legendary which gave you bonus damage based on your movement speed. So it's clear that they kind of wanted like a rogue or a feral druid, to have like a movement speed set, which would be like really good for certain challenge modes, you know, farming open world content, or you're moving incredibly quickly using sprint as a DPS cooldown. Like, that sounds interesting, but they've clearly been designed to be used in conjunction with one another. So having this early limit seems kind of band-aid, and also it will depend on how rapidly they unlock and allow you to use multiple, because the movement speed set had 4 pieces off the top of my head. So does that mean by the end of the expansion we'll be able to use 4 legendary items? I don't know. Also, they do say that even though these items will be suppressed and there'll be like a disabling aura in mythic raids, it will only be for the first X weeks. Does this mean that for the first 2 weeks, or does it mean that we will keep these disabled until the end boss is killed? If they have to say we're going to have these effects disabled all the way until a guild kills that last mythic boss, so that the race is completely pure, then okay, that's one thing that's kind of good. But if it's kind of just like a set number of weeks, then the mythic race is still going to be impacted quite heavily. If you look at the Hellfire Citadel race, and what I mean by race is when you have the 2 top guilds seeing who can get the world first, you know, end of mythic kill, and you have that point where there's a certain breakpoint between, oh, these guys have gotten like ring on 1 or 2 people now, and they're taking the legendary ring into Archimond. That's kind of a big deal. So if you're going to disable all the legendaries for the first 5 weeks, but the guilds are only, you know, 5 out of 10, then you've still screwed up the race, if that makes sense. And further down the line, you know, you're still going to need these for heroic progression, and they aren't going to be disabled for heroic progression, and even the top guild needs to farm heroic. And if you can farm heroic faster, then that makes your thing more efficient, and if you're more efficient, then you have more time. So the hardcore guilds are still going to need these items to make their initial gearing and their alt gearing more efficient, so they can streamline the entire process. Does that all make sense? It's kind of long-winded. There still hasn't been an announcement on how these items will interact in PvP, and that's something I'm particularly interested in, because this could be potentially a very punishing mechanic for PvP. So We just need to wait and see. If you guys know anything about the PvP interactions, then let me know down below. And another thing which isn't mentioned in these two posts, but it's mentioned elsewhere, is the way you obtain legendaries will be linked to difficulty, if that makes sense. So the more challenging content that you do, rather, the more likely you are to get items, which heavily implies that the challenge mode system will be the main form of delivery. So you'll have the adventure mode system where you're going out doing all the world bounties. That's a very clear and obvious, place to get legendaries, because you're out in the world killing items, killing monsters for items. You do all your bounties. At the end of your bounties, you get a box. Inside your box is random loot. If I was Blizzard, I'd be putting legendaries in that, because they're copying this from Diablo, and that's how the Diablo system works. Also, with the challenge mode system, the way that works is it's basically a timed dungeon. Every time you complete it, you get a slightly harder dungeon. So it seems that the higher up you are in the dungeon, like rank 50, rank 70, rank whatever the top rank is, you're more likely to get these items to drop. They still haven't said if these items can be warforged, if you can have duplicates dropping, so on and so forth. Because again, if you need to get 10 of these, swapping out on a boss by boss basis, then if you can get duplicates dropping, then that's going to get incredibly frustrating. So I really hope these cannot be warforged, because if they can be warforged, you're going to feel bad when yours isn't warforged, and you're going to be encouraged to keep grinding for that. So yeah. Positives of this system is they are listening, and the fact that there will be some limitations on the legendary power of these items is a good thing. The cons of that is the way they handle those limitations may completely kill the system, because it may just make the system more frustrating rather than more balanced, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'm Tarke. This is a cat. The real cat's hiding somewhere. I'll see you guys later. Have a good day. Bye-bye.